I cover a lot of music production hardware on this channel, and analog synths are a fun part of that. But of course, most of that hardware stuff, and in fact, all of it, is completely optional. Most of us are going to stick to making music mostly in the box, in our DAWs, on our computers. But there are some fairly magical, intangible qualities of analog synths, and so today I want to show you how to recreate those in the DAW, and don't worry, I'm going to even use some free plugins to do it. That includes the main synth plugin I'm using for this video, which is Tyrell N6 by Yuhi, which is a really good analog emulation plugin. It seeks to recreate the sound of analog synthesis, and I'm going to use some processing to take that even further, which I'll show you in a bit. So I'm going to play you the main lead sound that you heard in the intro, but with absolutely no processing, just the synth by itself, and then I'll break down why it sounds the way that it does. So hopefully you get the idea. And just for reference, if I add all this processing, which is almost like a cartoon version of an analog synth. It probably goes a little bit far, but I like the way it sounds. It sounds very nostalgic. But here's Yuhi by itself. This is a custom preset, and the main reason for that shimmer that it has is the voice count. So let me take this down to one voice. There's still some shimmer to it for sure, but with two voices, the reason for this is phase cancellation. Those two voices, like they would on an analog synthesizer, are starting at different points, and so those waveforms are overlapping at different points and canceling each other out in different ways as different notes come in. This is the reason that there's that fairly random phase cancellation, is these multiple voices. And in my mind, that is one of the most distinctive things about analog synthesis, is that phase cancellation that you just get for free. It's imperfect in a way that a lot of us have been trained to find really appealing sounding. To me, it sounds nostalgic and at the same time cinematic, which is just really cool. And it's really cool that this replicates it this well. I've also turned on drift, so here's without. This gives a little bit of pitch drift. And that's why that randomness exists. So drift, two voices, are doing a lot of heavy lifting here. If I turn both of those off, it sounds nice, but fairly static and not all that interesting. The other source of phase cancellation is simply the two oscillators. I've got both of these set to be a saw oscillator, and I've got the second oscillator tuned up an octave. So those waveforms are lining up at different places. I did an entire video showing how to make this sound on a hardware synth. In the case of that video, the Korg Minilog, I'll link it at the end of this video, but that's what made me want to recreate it digitally to see how close I could get. I like to think I got pretty close. And the final ingredient in the sound is the filter. This is a 24 dB per octave filter. Let me just get rid of the filter cutoff. You do that phase cancellation a little more clearly. And when I turn down the cutoff, envelope 2 is controlling its movement, so there's a slightly slower attack, giving that kind of wub sound, and then it's allowed to ring out a bit. So the filter is rising and then slowly falling back down, is the way to think of it. Finally, we've got the chorus. So let me turn that off. And here's what the chorus. Giving you even more warble for free and giving you a bit of stereo width. I really like the way this chorus sounds. It recreates that vibe very well, in my opinion. Got a bit of EQ, just to cut some of those lows. By itself, it sounds a bit thin, but let's get in the tape plugin. So without the tape plugin, the sound sounds good. It's nice and clear. It sounds like a very pristinely recorded synth, but this is what really brings it into dead obvious vintage territory, even if it's a bit exaggerated. So this is Tape Mellowfi by Arturia. It is not free, but I have been enjoying it. Disclosure, they did send it to me, but they don't get any say over the content of this video. They don't get to see it before it goes out. They didn't ask me to make this video. Nothing like that. In this case, the main things that this is doing is adding some saturation. This is the tone knob here. That just warms up the sound. And then I've got flutter and wow turned up a bit. And that's giving it its pitch warble. I should note, you can also add some pitch warble directly in the synth itself if you turn up the vibrato a bit. Turn down the rate a bit. And then I can adjust it to make it nice and subtle. But in this case, I'm getting that pitch warble through the tape plugin. Yeah, in my mind, that saturation and that warble is doing a lot of heavy lifting for the overall character of the sound. And finally, I've got Crystallizer by Sound Toys, which I don't know if this counts as analog, but I just think it sounds cool. This is an emulation of a hardware delay device, so I'm counting it. This is pitched up an octave, so only the delayed signal is pitched up an octave, and it's also reversed. That's where that shimmer comes from. Very similar setup with your saw oscillators. And in this case, I've turned this up to 8 voices. I actually like the way that sounds too, but in this case I wanted this to sound massive. And I'm putting it into mono mode rather than polyphonic mode in this case. Chorus is on. And the resonance on the filter is absolutely cranked. That's where that scream comes from. So I was able to just adjust it to taste there. I also did put tape mellify on here. Adding some extra drive sounds kind of nice. Too much. And I've got the filter engaged just a little bit, which is a fun option. And Crystallizer once again. Almost turning this into a pad layer for free, which is nice. And finally, this pad, which is very similar to the other stuff we've looked at so far. In this case, a triangle oscillator and a saw oscillator, and the chorus is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. This is like the classic Roland sound, or at least a generic approximation of it. A little bit of wow in here, and a little bit of filtering. And of course, Crystallizer, because I can't help myself. And just for good measure, a modified preset with a lot of the same techniques that we've looked at. And a really unnerving Crystallizer layer. Altogether, something that, in my opinion, sounds pretty convincingly hardware, at least for something made on a laptop in an afternoon. So, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see how to recreate some of these sounds on a hardware synth, you can click or tap up over here. And if you'd like some more sound design stuff, you can click or tap up over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.